A tragic incident occurred in Sokoto State when a military fighter jet mistakenly bombed two communities, killing 10 innocent villagers at least and injuring several others. Now, the jet was targeting the Lakurawa terrorist group in the villages of Gidan Sama and Rumtuwa. The Sokoto State Government has confirmed the incident and promised a thorough investigation. Now, the military has also issued a statement emphasizing that the operations are based on thorough intelligence and reconnaissance missions to minimize civilian casualties, even though human rights groups are calling for a review of military procedures to prevent such accidents. Now, joining us on the conversation this evening, we have Professor Tukur Muhammad-Bala, ACF National Publicity Secretary in Kaduna. We also have James Ibor, his Secretary Administration of Criminal Justice Monitoring Committee, Calabar, Cross River State. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us this evening.
My pleasure. The name is Professor Tukur Muhammad-Bala, not Bala.
Apologies for that. Thank you so much for that correction. All right, now let's begin with you, Professor Baba. Now, this is not the first case of civilian casualties from military airstrikes in Nigeria. Can you tell us, or can you assess, the frequency and the nature of these mistakes in the Nigerian military's operation?
Well, yeah. The latest mistaken attack, of course, 2 days ago came after just about a year ago when the military mistakenly bombed the Tudumbiri community in Kaduna State, where scores of people were killed. A few years earlier, this has happened also in Nasarawa State, where a number of cattle owners and their cattle were bombed. Again, we're told that this was an error. Again, about a year or two earlier, it had happened in Numan community of Adama. This was said to be an error, and so on. So, well, if you like, it has happened about 4 times or so in the last few years, but given the civilian casualty, the injuries and death in particular, these are too many. There are far too many. And of course, everyone thought we had learned a lesson with Tudumbiri in Kaduna State, like I said, just about a year ago. It's almost on the anniversary, on the first year anniversary. And then this one coming as it did at this time is very, very tragic. And it's something regretful. It's something that should not happen, should not be allowed to happen, but that it did says that lessons have not been learned from past mistakes, so to speak.
Okay, now let's hear from Mr. Ibor. Mr. Ibor, now the Sokoto State Government has actually promised a thorough, investigation from this recent incident. Now, what does an effective investigation look like in this context? And what factors do you think should be prioritized?
Well, I don't know what the Sokoto State Government is investigating. The Army has admitted that they got their target right. If you listen to the story very well, the Army had cordoned off the entire area before the bombing started. And the Chief of Defense Staff confirmed that in his interview yesterday, that they were targeting some terrorists and they got their target right. Annoyingly, he ended his statement by saying, which I think was very casual, that they are going to investigate. Let's assume first it was a mistake, like the
one in Tudumbiri.
Your guest has earlier said.
Yeah.
Yes, that these are mistakes too many, but this is not a case of mistake. And they are admitting that they had intelligence and they got their targets.
So what about the civilian casualties that were said to have been killed in the process? Can you hear me? What about the civilian casualties that were said to have been killed in the process?
Exactly. That is a concern because the army intelligence is very poor. You know, you cannot prosecute a war of this nature in your own country and consistently you'll be killing innocent people. Assuming, without considering they had intelligence that the terrorists were within civilian population, they would have exercised caution. They would have changed strategy, not to throw bombs on civilians. It is better for those terrorists to escape than one innocent civilian, innocent person to die. You know, so they cannot say, in fact, the statement of the Chief of Defense Staff is very annoying and frustrating also, given his status in the Nigerian army and in Nigeria generally. How can you tell us that civilians should avoid terrorists? When terrorists come in their midst, they should leave or they should avoid or maybe drive them away or something. Who does that? Do they have the capacity to even leave the environment where if terrorists decide to occupy civilian spaces, the civilians there are used as shield. Yeah. They don't have the capacity to even leave. So they have to devise means of getting them out and exposing them. The reason why they have to make good use of drones, they have to make good use of intelligence within the community. And that takes us to the issue of poverty and unemployment. We have to love our community, we have to marry them so they provide or confirm certain intelligence so they can prosecute this war successfully. Enough of this killing of innocent people in Nigeria. They should remember this war is not being prosecuted in Cameroon or in Ghana or outside the country. You're killing Nigerians, so who are you protecting? Every now and then you're bombing civilian populations. Is that how we are going to prosecute the war against terror?
All right, let's hear from Professor Baba.
Building up enemies among the civilian population.
All right, Professor Baba. Now, you've heard what Mr. Ibor has actually said, and I think his question is, for how long will civilians keep dying, all in the name of, you know, targeting a group of terrorists, you know, who have used these civilians as shield?
Exactly. Mr. Ibor, he has his point. He has his hand right on point. Now, listen. As far as we can tell from the news we are getting, this attack happened early in the morning. If you say around 7 o'clock, that is before sunrise in the northwest region. That's one. Number two, if they were targeting terrorists, how come the body count we have is only of civilians? Women and children, for God's sake, up to 10. That's number three. The fact that the Sokoto State Government, in the company of the senator representing Sokoto Central, Aliu Magata Kadawamako, and the Minister for Labor and Productivity actually visited this community and took part in the funeral obsequies of these villagers. You know, the statement by the Chief of Defense Staff is insensitive. The least he could do is to say, listen, we probably made a mistake. We will investigate. But to say that it was a target and they bombed terrorists, where are the bodies? Since the governor visited, promising support, the senator was there, the minister was there. How could that be? How could they visit the scene of an attack on terrorists? Where the villagers that buried their dead, were they burying terrorists? In front of the governor, the senator, and the minister of the Federal Republic. For God's sake, this is happening too often. We cannot go on like that. Of course, our support for the military in their effort against insurgency and terrorism is unequivocal. But the body count on innocent people is unacceptable. That you will come up with excuses that are clearly out of tune with the data on the ground is in fact criminal. We shouldn't be doing this.
But the military also insists, Professor Baba, the military insists that, you know, its airstrikes are based on thorough intelligence and reconnaissance missions. So do you think that there are specific intelligence flaws or gaps?
Excuse me. The same thing was said about a year ago on Tudumbiri, that it was based on intelligence. What kind of intelligence is that? If what you will end up doing is to bomb civilians, then of course that tells you that the intelligence was not there, or it is incompetent intelligence. It cannot be intelligence. It couldn't have been based on intelligence, given the civilian casualties there.
Okay, let's hear from Mr. Ibor now. Mr. Ibor, we know that airstrikes are actually meant to be, precise, but, accidents like this suggest significant lapses, maybe even a technological failure if you decide to actually investigate or check well. How effective do you think the Nigerian Air Force's technology is in terms of precision targeting?
Well, you see, with everything that has happened within the last 10 years, even the Air Force risking its own personnel shows you clearly that the capacity is very low, and there is no openness, sincerity. Prof has said, which kind of intelligence where consistently you're bombing civilian populations, and sometimes you admit it's a mistake, and when you're too ashamed, you say, they were terrorists there, and like he said, the body counts, no, not even one single terrorist was put down, assuming there were even terrorists there. The fact that they are among civilians should have made them to exercise caution. They should borrow a lift from how Russia is even prosecuting. The kind of casualties we have in the north among civilians is such that it's even 10 times more than what is happening in Ukraine. And remember, Russia is prosecuting this Ukraine in another country, but we are prosecuting this war in Nigeria. So we should know our territories very well. We should know our map. They should also learn to use technology very well. You see, we had expected by now our military should be using surveillance drones that also have the capacity of direct strike, confirming the identities of terrorists before striking, confirming and reconfirming, and ensuring that their strikes are precise. But we are not seeing all that. When once they see one terrorist in a community, the whole country is burnt down.
But Mr. Ibor,
in his own country like that.
Mr. Ibor, these technology you're talking about, the drones and everything, even a lot of people have actually said that it is not foolproof. So how significant a role does human error, I'm speaking in terms of, an event of negligence or incompetence, how significant a role does it play in these airstrike incidents?
How many of such strikes have been very precise? They've actually not demonstrated to us that they know what they are doing. In spite of the funding, the military has been gulping 1/3 of our national budget for the last 10 years, and even more the last budget. But honestly, there's a lot of they seem not to be accountable, and like others has happened, nobody will be held accountable in this one. You see, people will say, you're going to destroy their motivation, you don't need to punish them. Nobody does that. Nobody does that. If soldiers become negligent and there's loss of life, those officers should be punished so that others will learn. We are all committed to end terror in Nigeria, but we should eliminate mistakes. It is not worth it. Otherwise, then we are not ready to end the war. You can't come to villages and friendly forces, the national forces, killing villagers consistently, and you think they will cooperate? They would rather work with the terrorists who are more precise in their own strikes.
All right, now let's come back to you, Professor Baba. Now, you did mention last year's deadly strike on Tudumbiri village in Kaduna, that claimed over 120 lives. Now, can you tell us if, I'm not sure if you know, but is it possible that, some reforms have actually been implemented to avoid recurrences, and we're seeing this now.
No, indeed. Let me support the last speaker when he said these mistakes cannot be tolerated. Remember, Tudumbiri also gave us the same scenario. At first, the military said they acted on intelligence. It turned out to be very devastating intelligence. Then, of course, they tried to skirt around. When that couldn't work, they promised investigations. And actually, the investigation was conducted by the military itself. So the military was allowed to investigate itself. Be that as it may, a report came out that yes, it was an error and some people had been held to account. There are no details of who was held to account, how, or exactly what happened to them. Be that as it may, we could excuse that. But then at the very least, we should expect that lessons have been learned. Obviously, this has not been the case. Lessons have not been lost. We have just had an announcement that people were held to account. We don't know how or how severe, exactly what their role was. None of this was given. I mean, when the military gets to investigate itself, you don't expect anything. And of course, when we talk of the Sokoto State Government is severely constrained. It has no control over the military. It can make suggestions, but of course, what a lot of people called last year at Tudumbiri was that there should be an open investigation by by the military along with civil rights group and other arms of government. This did not happen. So what is appearing to happen is that each time there is a mistake, you claim, because we don't know the actual results, to have investigated and taken action. Exactly what action, we don't know. So that what we are saying is that, look, we need to be given a more believable version of exactly what happened. More important than that, we need to be assured that steps are taken and all will be done to avoid such casualties outside of extremely rare accidents. Now, intelligence in such an area of Silame is not a forested area, for God's sake. If there were terrorists there, and any traditional ruler in that area would tell you where they are. So the human intelligence should have been given priority more than an aeroplane flying. The villagers say from their accounts, they just woke up in the morning and planes were flying all over. All of a sudden, bombs were flying, and then homes were being destroyed. Women and children were dying. For God's sake, I mean, I'm sorry to say, I personally do not believe the version of the military, and I think it's very, very insensitive.
All right, you just gave a detailed account of what went wrong. That they're talking about how they woke up and they saw bombs flying and all that. So what impact do these incidents, or even a repeat of these incidents, have on the trust between the military and the civilian population? You also did say that you do not believe the military's account.
Exactly. It will destroy trust and confidence in the military. Confidence that you are being protected by the military, and the military is going after those terrorists that make life miserable on the people. When such is happening, people are going to begin to wonder, who is the terrorist? Is it we or the terrorists terrorizing us? So the military needs to do a lot in inspiring confidence. Inspiring confidence means, first and foremost, doing what it can to avoid civilian casualty. Secondly, being empathetic and not come up with some insensitive statement. You are burying children, you are burying women, you are burying able-bodied men, and then you are saying we actually cordon the area and bomb terrorists. For God's sake, I mean, where is the humanity in this?
Okay, let's hear from Mr. Ibor. Now, Amnesty International has also condemned the military's actions, and they cited a lack of accountability as well. What does this say about the Nigerian military's effectiveness? And I'm speaking from an international point of view.
Well, reports have shown consistently that the Nigerian Army is one of the most indisciplined force. And I say this without any fear or favor. The way the soldiers conduct themselves shows clearly that they are indisciplined. For instance, you can imagine what the Chief of Defense Staff, in the face of what happened, he had the report that women and children were bombed, except he's saying that the children were also terrorists, or even the women were state terrorists. Not even one ammunition was recovered from them. Not even one terrorist was killed. It shows you how insensitive, how irresponsible officers and personnel of the Nigerian Army could be. We see that every day. You see them whipping people, generals even beating people, and nothing is heard thereafter. You know, so I will use this opportunity to call on the Sokoto State Government and the National Assembly to set up a panel to work with National Human Rights Commission to investigate what happened and make public the report. The army must be compelled the army must be subjected to civilian rule because they are not gods. It is taxpayers' money they use to prosecute this war. Because of the endemic nature, the corruption even within the army, because they are not accountable. You know, we are just scared that, look, before they turn the guns on us, let's just pet them. We cannot continue like this. We cannot continue like this. In fact, I have said it before, that when we allow these excesses to continue, it is actually the foundation for a military coup. It's actually, we must be able to hold the army accountable for their excesses. And unless we are able to do that, they are going to overthrow this government.
Well, let's hope that it doesn't get to that. Now, Professor Baba.
That is our prayer, the reason why we are sounding it.
Okay. Professor Baba, now let's look at the ongoing threats from groups like the Lakurawa, you know, and the wider insecurity in the northwest and also the northeast. Do you believe that aerial operations are still the most effective approach, or are there a need for a shift to, you know, ground-based operations or even intelligence-led strategies?
I would prefer to see an intelligence, actionable intelligence, concrete intelligence-based fight against the terrorists. Now, this area where these things have been happening, the Silame group. Silame is not a mountainous area. It's in the heart of the Sahel. So the land is almost flat. It's just a few brushes, one or two trees in 50, 100 meters. I don't see where there cannot be ground operation there. I mean, if there is going to be an aerial operation, let it be in support of the ground operation. For God's sake, if these terrorists do not have the air support to enable the move, why can't our army move? We have a great infantry that has proved itself down without number in a number of peaceful operations. Why aren't we able to do that in an area that is flat, without mountains, it's just some river valleys and so on? That's what I would. I'm not a military personnel. Obviously, I've never had military experience. Okay. But speaking as an individual, I see no reason why there should be no emphasis on ground operations to clear these people. We have known that a lot of times, when they know the movement of troops are coming, these people escape, and so on. And like I said, in northern Nigeria, ask any traditional ruler, from the ward head or Meangua to the district head, they will, to the village head, to the district head, they will tell you these are where these people are. They are in our farms, in the bushes, on the outskirts of settlements, and so on. I mean, okay, maybe we're spread thin, but for God's sake, if we have to use air operations, it has to be precise. It has to be based on actionable intelligence, carefully gathered, carefully processed, and carefully applied. Otherwise, we cannot avoid these things we cannot avoid these things coming from time to time. And like we have said, the head count is simply too high. We cannot afford that. It erodes the
all right,
confidence of the people in the military, in the government, in the security forces. And this is where some of these terrorist organizations get in and promise the people that they will provide them security.
All right. Now, Professor Baba, just before we wrap up, Governor Ahmed Aliyu has actually extended condolences and also pledged support to the families of the victims. Now, in your view, how should the government respond to both the victims and also the wider community in terms of compensation, justice, and also long-term recovery?
Long-term recovery, I think the Sokoto State Governor has done as well as he could. Like I said, we have a constitutional lacuna here. He has very little. He is the chief security officer of the state, as every governor is the chief security officer of their state. But he has no operational control on even the police, not even civil defense, let alone the military. All he could do is to liaise with the military, invite them to be members of the State Security Council. But his response, the immediate response of the Sokoto State Government led by the governor, is highly commendable. He actually attended the funeral. And you know, in the north, when such deaths occur, funerals are held within hours. It's not something that wait. No dead body is allowed as much as can be held to be held for more than 12 hours. That he was there to condole the people, to assure them, to take part in funeral ceremonies, and to offer, we hear, 20 million naira in relief to the people is highly commendable. What one would wish to see is more relief effort to the people so that they rebuild their lives, because we understand from testimonies of the villagers that a lot of their poor dwellings have been burned to ashes. So there should be reconstruction as soon as possible. The state emergency management agency should step in. More than that, the federal government should come in. And compensation should be paid for every life lost in that community by the federal government. And would want to see a situation where military personnel and their commanders are held accountable. And we should not just be told that they have been held accountable and that's all. You know, it does not inspire confidence. There is a lot that can be done, but I think the Sokoto State Government has taken the right step, and the presence of the senator representing Sokoto East, as well as the Minister for Labor and Productivity, I hope it will help convince the federal government, convince the military that what they think or their perspective is actually a very, very highly wrong perspective, and it does not capture, it did not capture exactly what happened there. And then we can move from there once the confidence of the people is restored, that some government somewhere or government at some level cares for them. I think we'll be getting somewhere, and they will be cooperating with government, give intelligence on the movement of terrorists, and so and they should be very easy. Because now you can go into your room, you can go into the toilet, take your telephone, take your cell phone, and report the movement of persons and goods within your community without being seen. If they have a number, a contact, they can pass valuable information. I think that will also help beef up what poor intelligence that the military has on their hands.
Okay, right. Well, thank you so much for your contribution to this topic, Professor Tukur Muhammad-Bala, ACF National Publicity Secretary from Kaduna. We also would like to thank James Ibor, Secretary, Administration of Criminal Justice, Monitoring Committee, Calabar, Cross Rivers State, Nigeria. And with that, we'll take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll move on to the next segment. Do stay with us.